when you're healing and you're digging into some traumas, you're digging into some deep stuff that's going on in your body, going on in your mind, it can feel like sometimes there's no end to it. It's like you heal and more comes up, and you heal and more comes up. And there's some things that are so persistent in your experience that it's almost like it takes a long time for you to figure out exactly what is the root of this persistent discomfort, or this persistent fear, this persistent need for security, or whatever it might be. And this is where so many coping mechanisms and attachments, fear-based kind of defense mechanisms come from. Is this feeling of being small and unsafe. There's a sense of a wounded child looking for solace, looking for expression, looking for something that is stable in their life. It goes very deep sometimes. It goes back to childhood. It may go back even before you were born in this body. It could go back to past lives. So, if you are going through a healing process, and honestly, I don't know who isn't at this point in time, going through some kind of rapid acceleration, some kind of healing process, some kind of growth in life. I don't know who's not going through this right now. But if you are going through this, don't get too discouraged, because, if it takes you, even if it takes you 20 years to move through something, that's 20 years. That pain or that hurt, that defense, whatever, that defense mechanism, whatever it is, that could have been hanging out in your physiology for lifetimes, lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. It could have been hanging out for 1,000 years, and you're moving through it in 20. That's an accomplishment. That's something to be proud of. Even if you move through it, even if you only look at just this one life, just this current life you're living, how many years does it take to reinforce a negative behavior? And then you unravel it in half the time, a quarter of the time, maybe the same amount of time. The important thing is that you honor the process. That's what I'm constantly being reminded of this little person in this little body, and this little person is constantly being reminded of this by the intuition of the spirit, by the guidance of the self, constantly being reminded that these wounds are temporary. And the thing is that they heal so much quicker than we realize. But the thing about it, this is the thing that's so kind of screwy about it, I guess. I don't know. I was going to use another word, but the thing about it is that they're actually quite easy to heal, but you don't realize that what you're doing half the time is you're unconsciously regrowing the wound again. You think you're healing it, but you're reestablishing it somehow. And it's self-sabotage. That's kind of what it is in essence. Is where you're going in a certain direction in life, you're growing in a certain direction, and then you do something that kind of, maybe you've convinced yourself in your mind that, oh, this will help me grow, but in the end, it actually kind of stunts your growth a little bit. It holds you back. And you're like, oh man, that's not what I was trying to do. And, I know we've all experienced that in some way or another. And if these bad behaviors, if they weren't able to pose as good behaviors, then we would all be healed and radiant and, like we'd all be ascended masters by now. Or so to speak. I mean, maybe you can't really be an ascended master without having some struggles in life, but I think you know what I mean, like when it's, it's just the truth of what we are and our capacity to heal, to grow, to fortify. This is not such a complicated thing. But there is a force of illusion that tries to give you your truth back to you. It's like it tries to take your truth away from you and then sell it back to you in a more quote-unquote appealing form. And if we fall for that, then it's going to seem like some of these processes we go through, some of these just whatever it is we're going through, they're going to seem more complicated than they really are. And it's kind of one of the, it's kind of a funny thing, this play of truth and illusion, this play of, like what is real, what isn't, it's something that you really have to learn as you go. And, a healing process, for instance, can be a very powerful catalyst, because sometimes, when you can't run from your pain, you can't run from an unpleasant circumstance or an unpleasant situation, you get a real dose of truth. You get a real, you get real contrast there, especially when maybe these things are surfacing because you're going through a spiritual awakening. And spiritual awakenings bring a lot of bliss. They bring a lot of joy. They bring a lot of creativity, a lot of healing, a lot of pleasure, and bring a lot of beautiful things to the surface. And yet at the same time, when you're entering into a higher vibration, when you're anchoring into a higher or a broader understanding of life and yourself, there's so much stuff that gets revealed alongside all the bliss and the pleasure and the joy. Things that are less than blissful, less than joyful. And those things are, it's basically they need to be cleared out in order to accommodate all this new energy, to accommodate this new understanding, to accommodate this new joy and this new bliss and just even a sense of equanimity. You don't necessarily have to be like riotously exuberant every moment of every day, Not that kind of joy, but, there's a joy in equanimity. There's a peace in just being yourself without having to run away from your own quietude, without having to run away from your own peace and your own sense of spaciousness. There's a real beauty in that. A profound, immaculate beauty in that. And there can be so many things, unconscious resistances and pains and fears that come up in the light of that recognition, that inner recognition, that deeper truth that's coming to light now. Because these things have been hiding underneath your willingness to avoid your truth. Where you have made agreements, you've agreed for some reason to doubt yourself. You've agreed to play small. You've agreed to maybe not admit that you are God. Maybe to pretend that you are separate from the truth of being. When you make agreements like this, that's where the unconscious resistances and the pains and the fears and just what we often consider to be darker material, darker stuff. I don't know if it's necessarily darker or so much as it's stagnant energy. It's stagnant energy because it doesn't flow in accord with the rhythm of life. So it doesn't really have a way to refresh itself. And it becomes frustration and anger and these kind of feelings. But, there's nothing wrong with any of these emotions. The point is, that you express these things. We can often look at these things as though they're lower vibrations, but you know what? There's nothing wrong with lower vibrations. A tree needs roots in order to grow its fruit. You say the branches are the higher vibrations of the tree, and the roots are the lower vibrations of the tree. Maybe this could be a way to represent it. higher and lower aspects of the tree. It's the same as we have higher and lower aspects of ourselves. But there's nothing wrong with lower vibrations. If it's natural and it's healthy for you to be at a lower vibration, then that's where you should be. That's where your energy should be. Because you're just going to encourage a lot of toxic positivity. I mean, that's kind of a funny thing to say, toxic positivity. There's no such thing as toxic positivity. It's either positive or it's not, But we pretend what it is an illusion. It's one of those illusions. The truth is, maybe you want to be on a lower vibration for a while. Maybe you need to heal your roots. Maybe you need to help your lower body for a while. Maybe you need to get out and move your body around, not be in your head so much. There's nothing wrong with that. I think when we refer to low vibe situations, or even when someone says that that's a low vibe person, they're a low vibe person, they have a low vibe thing going on, usually that seems to indicate that that person is being held in a lower vibration artificially. Maybe it's time for them to come into a higher understanding, but something is holding them back, and that creates a lot of pressure and frustration. So then we associate lower vibrations with anger and stuff like that. The anger comes from being held in an artificial position. I mean, there could be people, you could look at it from a higher perspective too. You're in higher vibrations, but if you're not supposed to be if you're in a higher vibration superficially or artificially, like you get into a higher, quote unquote, higher state of energy by avoiding your lower responsibilities or your lower body or whatever it might be, that's basically where we get the phrase toxic positivity. When people are pretending to be something that they're not. It can go both ways, really. It's not about it's not that low is bad and high is good. It's just about being where you're supposed to be. That, your body is always trying to heal. Your mind is always trying to heal. There's really no reason why any of us should be sick, apart from those divine sicknesses that maybe God, the angels, the powers, the true powers of the universe sometimes will give us some difficulty or sickness, some kind of injury in order to promote our growth. And when we have learned a lesson that we have come to learn from that situation, then the sickness is healed. It can be miraculous sometimes, just happens like that. But for the most part, there's not a lot of reason why we should be sick. There's not a lot of reason why we should be, always running away from our own self. It's a misconception, it's a misconception that we agree to it on an unconscious level. And as we become more conscious and more aware of who we are, what is real, what is not real, we begin to see the difference. We begin to see what is distorted and what is clear. We begin to see the difference between the two. And so at that point, it doesn't really matter if you're on a lower vibration. It doesn't really matter if you're on a higher vibration. It just matters that you are where you are meant to be. And you realize that when you put aside the expectation that the universe is already orienting you all the time. Your body is the universe just as much as the universe is your body. And your person is the spirit just as much as the spirit is your person. You are right in the proper flow of things all the time. And you are always being compelled to orient yourself with the cosmic unfolding. There's really never a time where anything we do or say, there's really never a time where we're so out of sync with reality. It's like we actually artificially put ourselves there because we don't abide in the self. We don't abide in our deep, true understanding. And then we start to take a kind of artificial, superficial version of ourselves to be the boss. and then, you know, and you find out that that version of ourselves is doesn't really know what it's doing, because it's acting as though it's separate from the source of intuition, the source of guidance that is so necessary in our lives. And you realize guidance, your whole life is wind assisted. And the thing is that we are like birds who it's like we can't find the wind sometimes. It's not true. The wind is always blowing, but it's like we pretend we can't see it. And you know why we do that? Maybe many reasons, but you know one of the big reasons why we do that is because we can see where the wind is taking us. And you know, that direction that we're being asked to go in, it might not fit our expectation. It might be a direction we're not comfortable going in, at least not yet. It might be too different from what we expect life to provide for us. But it doesn't mean that it's wrong. And it doesn't mean that our body's not healing. And it doesn't mean that God isn't here all the time and that we are, you know. This is the thing. We really got to get out of that habit of pretending that this universe is somehow flawed. Because, you know, if you get into that kind of rhetoric and you get into that mentality, you know, it's like we use our powers of creation to tell ourselves that we're powerless. We use our immaculate perfection, our immaculate connection, our immaculate just abidance in the truth to tell ourselves that we are devoid of truth. You know, we can use our powers of discernment to cloud our vision, even. That's how powerful we are. Just in the same way that God is so omniscient and God is so all-seeing that God can imagine what it's like to forget himself, herself, come into a human form, and then try to find him or herself again. God can do that, you know, and you see, God can do that, we can do that. You know why? Because we are the same. Yourself is the self is yourself, you know. When the boundaries between the two, when the boundaries between the two dissolve, that's where the truth becomes it becomes clear. It becomes clear.